This program is brought to you by the members of WCNY. Thank you.
Welcome, America, to Balancing Act, the show that aims to tame the political circus of two-party politics. I'm John Katko. This week, the SNAP program. Is it working or in need of reform? In the Senate ring, we'll ask Craig Gunderson about the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Then, Gina Plata-Nino and Chris Edwards debate the issue on the trapeze. Then, I'll give you my take. And Bloomberg's Eric Wasson is here with what's happening next week in Washington. But first, let's walk the tightrope. In his inaugural address, President John F. Kennedy said, "If a free society cannot help the many who are poor, it cannot save the few who are rich." One way America helps those in need is through SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. SNAP provides low-income households with money to buy groceries. You may remember it as food stamps, and its mission goes back nearly a century. During the Great Depression, farmers were producing more food than struggling families could afford. So, in 1933, under the Agricultural Adjustment Act, the federal government stepped in, buying surplus food and distributing it to hungry households. It stabilized prices for farmers and fed millions of Americans. Then, in 1939, the first food stamp program launched. Participants bought orange stamps, think early coupons, and for every dollar spent, they received 50 cents in blue stamps to buy surplus foods like milk, eggs, beans, and produce. It was practical, targeted, and temporary. When wartime jobs surged, the program ended in 1943. But hunger didn't disappear. By the early 1960s, investigations revealed severe food insecurity in some of the poorest communities in America. In response, Congress passed the Food Stamp Act of 1964, creating a permanent nationwide program as part of Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty. In 1977, sweeping reforms simplified eligibility and made benefits more accessible. A major turning point came in 1996 with a bipartisan bill between Democratic President Bill Clinton and Republican Speaker Newt Gingrich. It was called the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act. It introduced work requirements for able-bodied adults without dependents. Work, volunteer, or attend job training for at least 20 hours a week, or benefits were capped. In 2008, the program officially became SNAP and transitioned fully to electronic benefit cards. Today, SNAP helps about 40 million Americans buy groceries each year. Since the beginning of the Big Beautiful Bill in 2025, the rules have tightened. More adults up to age 64 now fall under work requirement guidelines. And while this program is essential, it isn't perfect. According to the U.S. Government Accountability Office, roughly 11.7% of SNAP benefits, about $10.5 billion in 2023 alone, were improper, including agency errors and fraud. That raises important questions about oversight, integrity, and how well the program is serving both taxpayers and families in need. Let's explore those questions with our first guest in the center ring. Joining me now in the center ring is Craig Gunderson with the Baylor Collaborative on Hunger and Poverty. Craig, welcome to the show, and let's jump right into it. Can you give us some of the history of SNAP, what it is and why did it start?
Right. So SNAP began in the early 60s as a program to address the severe problems of hunger and malnutrition in the United States, and it's expanded over time. It became a nationwide program in 1974, and today it serves approximately 40 million Americans at a cost of $100 billion a year.
What were some of the precursors that gave rise to the SNAP program in the 60s?
So some of the precursors were they would have commodity distribution programs where they would give various commodities to food commodities to individuals, and then all of a sudden it developed into SNAP, well, actually originally called the food stamp program, whereby instead of giving people food directly, is they would be given, in that case, vouchers to purchase food. And now today it's run through the electronic benefit transfer card, where somebody on SNAP can use these EBT cards to purchase food at approved food retailers.
So let's talk about the evolution, if I can, for a moment. It started in the 60s, but there's been some milestones along the road where they've made adjustments to the program. Could you highlight those for us?
Yeah, sure. I think there was two main changes. Was the first was in 1979 when it switched from what's called the so-called purchase requirement, whereby you had to purchase SNAP benefits at a discount and then use them, and that just changed to the fact is that people didn't have to purchase their SNAP benefits at a discount, and people were just given SNAP benefits. The second major change occurred in 2021 when there was a permanent 20% increase in SNAP benefits. This was an unprecedented increase in SNAP benefits. Historically, SNAP benefits have just been increased by inflation, but for many SNAP recipients, SNAP levels were not enough to bring them out of food insecurity. So in 2021, there was a permanent 20% increase in SNAP benefits.
And that was during the COVID epidemic, is that correct?
That was actually after it, and it
After.
was distinct from the COVID. There was some changes made to SNAP during COVID, but this 20% increase was independent of COVID.
Now, there was a time, I believe it was 2008, if you could explain, they went from the actual coupons the recipients were given to the electronic form. Why was that?
So it's for a few different reasons. Is first of all, as we moved more and more to a system where people were using credit cards and debit cards rather than cash, this made more sense because previously people got a coupon, but they would use that at a store. But there's two fundamental reasons for this. First of all, to make it easier for individuals to use. It's a lot easier for SNAP recipients to use an EBT card rather than these coupons. They could lose the coupons and things like that. EBT card is more straightforward. But it also allowed us to cut down on some aspects of fraud. It was much more difficult for SNAP recipients to sell their benefits. It was also much more difficult for stores to basically give individuals cash in exchange for their SNAP benefits. Both those things decreased dramatically when we switched to these electronic benefit transfer cards.
Yeah, so it basically helped eliminate the black market for the food stamps, right?
Exactly.
Okay, great. So now let's go forward and talk about what the program is doing now and who it's serving. How many people are being served in this program?
Roughly, I mean, the number of SNAP recipients goes up and down with the state of the economy. So during good economic times, it tends to decline. During bad economic times, it tends to increase. Currently, there's about 42 million Americans on SNAP, which is down from the record highs, say, back in 2013. But it's at the cost of about, currently, it's about $100 billion a year for the first SNAP.
So how does one get SNAP benefits? How do they qualify and how do they go about getting them?
So the main criteria is you have to, in essence, I could go into a lot of details about this, but just to succinctly state that is that somebody's income has to be below, somebody's income has to be below the poverty line, and their assets have to be below a certain threshold, which varies by state. If my income and my assets are below those levels, I then go into an office that distributes SNAP benefits and then fill out the application forms. I first have to apply for the benefits, and then on an occasional basis, for anywhere from 6 months to a year, I have to go back in and recertify for benefits.
So what happens if you, during that time period, after you get SNAP benefits, you start making money? What happens?
In principle, what somebody's supposed to do is if I'm on SNAP and that my income increases, I should report that to the SNAP office, and then my benefits will be changed accordingly. Because the way it works is that the amount of SNAP benefits I get is inversely related to my income. So if my income rises, my SNAP benefits fall. And if there's a change in my income, I should report this. And people have to report this every time they recertify.
So when you get the SNAP benefit, you get this card, and then it's reloaded, however, electronically or what have you. They go to the store. Is there any restrictions on things they can purchase?
So if I go to, in general, no. For example, I can't purchase paper towels. I can't purchase Kleenex. Also, I can't purchase alcohol or tobacco products. These are some of the things that are available at food stores that I would not be able to purchase. And there's also some very specific restrictions, like I can't purchase, if I'm on SNAP, like rotisserie chickens or already prepared foods like that. But other than that, there's very few restrictions on what people can purchase with SNAP.
You know, there's been some criticisms that's a concern that people are allowed to buy foods that are not good for them from a health standpoint. Is there been any studies done about that, about the use of SNAP for those things?
So, I mean, SNAP recipients, like the rest of the population, have a mix of quote unquote healthy and quote unquote unhealthy foods. And so their consumption patterns do not differ that markedly from other persons of similar incomes who are not on SNAP. So studies have shown that SNAP recipients just purchase food like everybody else does. And in fact, if anything, SNAP enables people to purchase a healthier mix of foods because they have more money to purchase this food with.
Well, we only got about a minute and a half left, but let's talk about the practical realities of this. What would happen if the SNAP program didn't exist in the United States? We didn't have this food program.
Well, there would be a dramatic increase in food insecurity in the country. As I mentioned before, about 40 million Americans receive SNAP, and we would imagine that a high proportion of those, if the SNAP benefits ended tomorrow, is that they would become food insecure. This would be in addition to SNAP recipients who are already food insecure. So if we lost SNAP, we'd see huge increases in food insecurity in the United States.
So we got about a minute left, and in that time, I just want to ask you, has there been any proposals to tweak the program in any way, shape, or form? In particular, the one that I've heard is about block granting the money to the states, allowing the states to better implement the program. What do you think about that?
So I think there has been a push in some circles to block grant SNAP, and I think there are some advantages to that. States do a lot of creative things, and I would allow my home state of Texas to do some creative stuff. We would do different things differently than say, Illinois. But the reason I'm not in favor of block granting is one of the key strengths of SNAP is that it's an entitlement program. So whenever there's increased need for SNAP benefits for the reasons we were talking about earlier, is the program automatically expands. Once you move to a block grant program, that automatic expansion or contraction of the program is removed. So this is part of the reason why I'm just not a fan of block granting of SNAP.
Craig Gunderson from Baylor University, thank you so much for your time. Now it's time for the trapeze. On the trapeze this week are Gina Plata-Nino, the SNAP director at the Food Research and Action Center, and Chris Edwards from the CATO Institute. Welcome to both of you. And Gina, let's get right into it. Do you have any concerns with the SNAP program in its current form?
Thank you for having me. And yes, we do. Back in July, SNAP experienced one of the biggest cuts in history, pretty much setting up the dismantling of the program. Over $187 billion were targeted towards the program, and we are going to see deep cuts, and we're starting to see deep cuts into the program, something that has been completely unprecedented.
So when you say deep cuts, could you briefly summarize what you're referring to?
Yes, it attacks the program at various levels. It expands time limits, meaning individuals can only get SNAP benefits for 3 months in a 3-year period if they can show that they're working at least 20 hours a week, even though there's data that many individuals are working. It's just that our economy and the gig economy doesn't allow for enough hours. It expands this to individuals from 18 to 64, even those who have retired and are on Social Security for the first time in history. It also impacts caretakers of individuals 14 and up. It takes away protections from veterans, from unhoused individuals, from youth aging out of foster care. And all of this means that state agencies will have to touch these cases multiple times and will be cutting off individuals, millions of Americans throughout the year, beginning next year. We also have seen that the bill has also frozen the way that the program is evaluated, meaning SNAP benefits right now are about less than $6 a day. That will be stagnant regardless that our food prices have risen so much, regardless of inflation, regardless of how expensive things are. The SNAP benefits will remain the same. And two of the most major concerns is that for the first time in history, it takes away the partnership between the state and the federal government from 50-50%, saying that now states have to provide 75% of administrative funding. And beginning in FY28, it will require states to pay a partial amount of their benefit amount. And I think this is important because SNAP has never been a line item budget in most state budgets. So for some states, it will come out to having to pay billions of dollars to keep the program going, billions of dollars that could have been utilized in other aspects, but they're much needed in order to keep individuals, Americans fed and making sure that they have enough resources to put food on the table.
Okay, Chris, any concerns you have in its current form?
I think cuts in SNAP are entirely appropriate. The program has exploded in costs in recent years. The number of people on SNAP has gone from 20 million to over 40 million over the last 20 years, and the costs have skyrocketed. So I think cuts are entirely reasonable to low-income welfare programs like SNAP, but we should also cut, welfare for wealthy people and corporate welfare as well. So I'm for fairness across the board. We have a giant federal government deficit. I think we ought to cut corporate welfare and low-income welfare. With SNAP in particular, one of my big concerns is that remarkably 1/4 of all the benefits in SNAP, a quarter of 110 billion a year in benefits, goes for junk food, cola, potato chips, candy bars, etc. With the SNAP or EBT cards, people can go into grocery stores and food stores and buy essentially anything. So that's an enormous amount of waste in my view. We have a huge obesity crisis in this country. Low-income folks in particular have higher obesity than other Americans, and yet we're massively subsidizing calories, junk calories, through the SNAP program. That's a real big concern.
Okay, Gina, two quick questions, and I need brief answers on these, if you will, please. The first one is responding to his concern about the junk food issue. Isn't that a legitimate concern if SNAP is supposed to provide basic nutritional value and people are able to get junk food with that? Shouldn't we try and do something about that?
It does provide nutritional value for all Americans, and the diets of low-income individuals who are on SNAP do not differ from the rest of America. We have an issue across America, and individuals utilizing this program should not be targeted. The study that is being quoted is a study that's 10 years old. It was utilized for one specific region. It's not up to date. In fact, SNAP users have better health outcomes than most individuals, and their diets do not differ from most Americans.
Okay, the second question I have for you, and then I'll go back to Chris, is, listen, what Chris noted was true. We have terrible budget deficits and we're getting squeezed from all sides. Isn't it a good idea to take a good hard look at SNAP and try and squeeze out some efficiencies in the program if we can? I understand you have concerns, but isn't it not a good idea to try and get some of the efficiencies back into the program?
No, I agree with Chris to saying that, the $187 billion cut off from SNAP was giving to wealthy corporations and individuals. We should definitely look at our tax budget. But SNAP provides not just individuals with food, it provides jobs, it provides billions of dollars to the local economy. So it is a program that for every dollar spent, it creates almost $1.80 in the local economy, creating economic mobility and generation.
So Chris, could you point to some specific areas where you think we could increase efficiencies in the program without having to cut the actual benefits of SNAP? I mean, you hear a lot of stories about the bureaucracy and the waste, the fraud, the abuse. Anything in particular you can point to?
Well, there is an enormous amount of fraud in the SNAP program. There's a big problem with skimming, for example. People are stealing the EBT card numbers and getting fraudulent benefits. I think the trick here to reforming SNAP is to give the program back to state governments. I think there is a problem with low-income obesity. Low-income folks on SNAP are more obese than other Americans. There is no doubt about that, study after study. But low-income obesity is a complex problem. So I think the solution is here, give the SNAP program back to the states, let the states experiment with different types of nutrition programs. That's the way to deal with that problem. The same with the fraud problem, which is a big problem in SNAP. The states now have no incentive to cut back on fraud because the federal government pays for 100% of the benefits in SNAP. If you give more responsibility back to the state governments, they will have more of an incentive to double check and make sure people getting SNAP really are eligible.
So, Gina, what about that? What about just giving the block grants to the states and let the states figure it out and try and increase the efficiencies?
There's already that partnership. It is a partnership between the federal government and the state government.
Yeah, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about just giving the money to the states and let the states kind of figure out how to implement it. That's what he's saying.
Well, they are. States have options of how to run the program, which is why, depending on your zip code, the state program is more accessible depending on what states do. There's a partnership of 50% of administrative funding, so states are paying, but states, federal government sets up the guidelines, and states have options of how to administer the program, and some do it more successfully than others.
Okay, Gina, really quickly here, we only got about a minute left. I want to give Chris an opportunity to respond. If you could fix one thing in this bill or one thing in this program to reform it, what would it be?
Going back to July 3rd and clawing back the reconciliation law that had the major cuts to SNAP.
Okay, Chris?
Well, again, cut 1/4 of all the benefits here. That's over $20 billion a year of taxpayer money is being spent on junk food. I think that's ridiculous. We ought to give the states the option to be able to cut out as much of the junk food as they can in the SNAP program.
So we actually have a few seconds left here. Gina, what about that? Isn't there any concern at all about the junk food issue? It seems like a legitimate concern to me from a health standpoint.
It's a concern for all Americans. And again, there's one study. The data just doesn't match it. The diets of SNAP recipients are no different. And so you can't say that. It's not a fact that individuals are accessing this food. In fact, they have better health outcomes than individuals, less likely to be in the ER, less likely to be hospitalized because of the nutrition that SNAP provides for low-income individuals.
Okay, Gina Plata-Nino, Chris Edwards, thank you both for a robust conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now it's time for my take. America is blessed with tremendous wealth and economic power, and to whom much is given, much is expected. We should both expect and desire to take care of the neediest among us. We do that partly through SNAP benefits, which help feed 40 million Americans every year. However, with roughly 10% of SNAP's dollars lost to waste, fraud, and abuse, more than $10 billion annually, we could be helping millions more. We have an obligation to the poor, but we also have an obligation to the taxpayers. That's not cold, that's just good governance. I urge Congress to conduct rigorous oversight and for the relevant federal agencies to put politics aside, strengthen their stewardship, and identify problem areas in the SNAP program. Too many issues get kicked down the road in Washington. If we know there's a problem, we should address it and fix it. Congress must enact necessary reforms, ensuring that hard-earned taxpayer dollars go to a SNAP program that operates smoothly and efficiently. We owe it to those who need it and to those who fund it. And that's my take. For a look at what's happening next week in Washington, we turn to Bloomberg's congressional reporter, Eric Wasson. Welcome, Eric. So what's going on?
Thanks so much for having me on. The main thing that Congress is looking to deal with in the coming week is the Obamacare premium subsidy issue. Without action by Congress, premium subsidy tax credits will expire at the end of the year, and many users, maybe 22 million Obamacare users, will see their premiums go up. The Democrats, as part of their shutdown ending deal, secured a promise from Majority Leader John Thune for a vote on the Senate floor on their preferred proposal. We expect it to be sort of a clean extension, maybe 2 or 3 years of this premium subsidy. That's not going to attract Republican support, so it's expected to fail. There had been some attempts at a compromise, sort of putting income limits, anti-fraud controls, and other reforms to the program. If that comes through, that's something I'm looking for, whether it comes from the White House or from a group of moderates led by Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania in the House. If that comes through, there's a chance that these premium subsidies could be extended. If that doesn't come through, we're going to see a failed vote in the Senate. The Republicans may put a very conservative option up, essentially to Democrats say would weaken Obamacare by allowing cheaper alternative plans, and that would also fail. So, this would be a hit to consumers and also to insurance companies that we are tracking here on the markets, because this is going to deprive them of a large number of healthy clients who would opt not to pay for the higher premiums and to go without insurance. We're also looking at the annual defense authorization bill. This is always a bill that attracts a lot of attention. Congress for decades has passed this in December on time. This year, there's an attempt to sort of regulate or to deal with the artificial intelligence issue. There are some people who want to have a moratorium on patchwork of state regulations on AI that could be attached to this bill. There's other attempts to sort of regulate the sale of advanced chips NVIDIA is one of the biggest capitalized stocks on the trading on the U.S. stock markets. They're looking to be able to have looser restrictions on the sale of these advanced chips abroad, and there are opponents with national security concerns who want to restrict that. So those are some of the things that I'm looking forward to. Of course, we have another funding deadline at the end of January. The government would shut down again, and I'm looking at any sort of movement to pass the remaining 9 appropriations bills that would be needed to prevent such a shutdown.
Eric, a quick question for you on the Obamacare subsidies. These were temporary subsidies that were enacted during COVID, is that correct?
That's correct. There are subsidies for low-income people that are more permanent and part of the Obamacare law, that they will remain in place, but they were enhanced subsidies that go more towards the middle class that were put in under COVID. Republicans say that this is a waste of money. Obamacare needs to be reformed to lower health care costs. They're kind of proposing, for example, a health savings account to allow consumers to shop around and use that money on their own, to get some market forces in here. But a lot of the proposals don't allow that money to be used for premiums, more for out of pocket. So Democrats say it doesn't really help in the short term with the Obamacare premium spike that's coming at the end of the year.
Eric Watson, Bloomberg News. Thanks so much. That's all for this week, folks. To send in your comments for the show or to see Balancing Act extras and exclusives, follow us on social media or go to balancingactwithjohnkatko.com. Thank you for joining us, and remember, in the circus that is politics, there's always a balancing act. I'm John Katko. We'll see you next week, America.